To this tutorial, we're going to go over a basic ball bounce with the Fox rig that I sent out earlier. So you should have received a link to a tutorial that went over the basic instructions on how to maneuver this rig, and now we are going to talk about how to get this nice ball bounce action as well as the secondary action with the tails and the ears. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to File, New Scene, and start with a blank slate. I'm then going to grab my Fox rig and drag it into the scene. Now, a couple error windows may pop open about some scripts or something about mental ray. If that happens, don't worry about it. It's not really going to affect what we're doing. Okay. First thing I want to do is grab the main control for this Fox and hide all this peripheral stuff we don't need. So the tail, hide it. Ears, hide it. Extra controllers on the sphere, hide it. If the tail controls are showing, hide them. We're only concerned with the main mass, one piece at a time. We're not going to tackle the entire thing at once. That'll get distracting and take away from the focus. Alright, now for this animation, we're going to have it be about a second long, which translates to film as 24 frames. So I'm going to go ahead and set my scene to 24 frames. The next thing I need to make sure that I have set is the playback speed. So we're going to go down here and click the little orange man running from the flying gear. And that's going to open up our preferences, specifically our time slider preferences. And it looks like a playback speed is already set to real time. Now the default is play every frame, which is going to be far too fast. And play every frame is really only good for like particle simulators. We're going to be dealing with animation, so real time, 24 frames per second is what we want. If you're working on a PC, it'll say 24 frames per second times 1, which means standard playback speed. So I'm press save. Okay, and now we are ready to get started. I'm going to grab this sphere and I'm going to start from the up position. So I'm going to make it a nice round number and set it to 10. Then I'm going to set my key. I can set my key by pressing the S key, which will key all my channels, Shift W, which would key just the translate channels, or, since I know this is the only channel I'm going to be animating on presently, I'm just going to right click and key the Y. Now typically if I'm working on a rig like the previous ball rig from the other exercise, these are all grayed out and the translate Y would have a red marker there to indicate that a channel's been keyed. Now this particular rig has character sets attached to it, which is why all the channels are yellow. I'm not going to delve into character sets presently, but if you find a rig that has connections that have nothing to do with keys, then to check to see what channels you're keying, just reference the graph editor. Now we can access the graph editor by altering our workspace to animation mode, or we could just go to Windows, Animation Editors, and click on the graph editor. And there it is. I'm going to go ahead and minimize it. The next thing I'm going to do is go to frame 12, halfway in the center, and I'm going to bring this sphere down. Let's say about 1. I'll keep it right above the ground plane and hits the ground. Now, as you noticed, a little red tick mark has appeared without me pressing Shift W or right-clicking and keying the channel. That's because the moment you set a keyframe on a channel and then move something on that channel or add a numerical value on that channel, and you have auto key turned on, which is this little button right here, right next to no character set and right next to the little guy running from the gear, this button, if you set auto key, then it'll automatically generate a key every time that channel has a different input. So I'm going to go to frame 24 and I'll enter in 10 on the Y-axis and see what we got. Okay, well our ball is definitely moving up and down, but it kind of feels like a yo-yo. You know, like there's some invisible hand up here moving the ball up and down. It's not really moving like a little sentient ball bouncing. So I'm going to go to my graph editor and see what's going on. I've got my Y-axis selected. I'm going to press F, which will frame my keys. And I see that there is ease in and ease out, or flatten tangents, causing cushioning. at the beginning and in the middle. Now, I like this cushioning at the beginning because, you know, if you've got a ball that's hitting the ground, it's going to gain a bit of speed as it hits and then slow down at the top because that momentum is being challenged by gravity, which will cause this kind of slowing down. So the cushioning is welcomed at the top but not at the bottom. We want it to speed up. So, well, these flattened tangents facilitate that slowdown. What we want down here is a linear tangent. So I'm going to go over here and about 4 keys over, 3 keys over, 1, 2, 3, is this button linear tangent. Boom. And that is going to make this straighter. Because remember, the quickest distance between 2 points is a straight line. So if you straighten the line, it's going to speed it up. So let's see what our results are. Nice. I like to push this a little further. I'm going to go over here and adjust this tangent handle. If I hold down shift, it's going to keep this from moving all over the place as I adjust it. But I'm going to go ahead and just pull it out like 1/2 inch and do the same on the other side, about 1/2 inch. Okay? So that just kind of extends my cushioning. Down here, I'm going to have to straighten this out because you can see that it added a slight curve when I did that. But if I try to adjust this, you'll notice immediately that it messes with the other side. We don't want that to happen. So this is a unified tangent, meaning how I handle one side is going to adjust to the other. So I want to break the tangent. Up here there's this little V. This represents a broken tangent, and it turns these handles into little ... handles to indicate that they're broken. So I'm going to go ahead and straighten this so it's more of a straight line. Do that on both sides. And take a look at our results. Ooh, I like that. Feels weightier. Okay, so that makes me happy. Now let's go ahead and add some squash and stretch. I'm going to go over to the squash handle, and when I middle mouse drag, we can kind of see how nice that looks in adjusting. So I'm going to just right click and key selected at the beginning and key selected at the end. In the graph editor, I can see my squash value as one straight line because there's no variation. Okay? So I'm going to go to the middle, and this is where I'm going to want the shmoosh to kind of occur. So I'm going to add just a little bit. I don't want it to go too crazy. Maybe a -0.2. Just so, because it's not like a ton of distance between point A and point B. So now you'll notice immediately that something's a little bit odd here. And the odd thing here is it's deforming before it ever hits the ground. That's because we only have squash. We want some stretch in there. So I'm going to go before frame 12, and I'm going to stretch it to about, like, if it's squishing at 0.2, let's stretch it at 0.2. A nice little stretch on both sides. Okay? See how that looks. Yeah, I'm liking that. Now, if I want to kind of postpone some of this squashy stretchiness, I could go a couple frames in and set a key to 0 there, like at frame 3, and maybe at frame 22. And then we'll postpone the stretching a little bit. So when he's up in the air, he kind of maintains his circularness a little longer. And if I want to adjust that, I can always go in, grab this squash and stretch channel, and just shift click and move that key around using the interior yellow handles. But I don't. I like the result. This is fun. It feels fun. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and save my work. Save scene as. And maybe I'll call it ball bounce 001. It's kind of bad form to just save a Maya file without a project, but for the sake of time, we're just going to jump into this. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and grab my main mass, and I'm going to ask to see that tail again. Now, I don't want to see all these controls. These controls, not really my thing. Let's go ahead and hide those controls. I just want to see the tail. Now, in the previous tutorial, we talked about creating a button. Oh, looks like the button broke. So I'm going to right-click this button and delete it. That's okay, we can just review the button making process. So in the previous tutorial we talked about grabbing all 4 of these parts of the tail and then being able to rotate and make this really cute, kind of cute wagging motion with the tail. But it's kind of tedious to have to grab all 4 of these every time I want to mess with this tail. So what we're going to do is create a custom shelf button. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go create, sets, quick select set, and create a tail button. And add to shelf. Boop. Now when I select off the tail, I can click and automatically be back with what I've selected. Okay, so let's think about the poses of this tail. First off, I'm only going to be working with rotation values. Whoa, that's crazy. Rotation values. So I'm not worried about translation or scale. So I'm going to go ahead and press Shift E. So you can see the little hotkey that appears there on the tail. And let's see, if this guy is, now maybe instinctually you're thinking, okay, this guy's about to go down, so the tail should follow, right? Wrong. This is a secondary action, meaning that this is going to follow after the main mover. So this is going to follow the ball. If the ball has just come up, that means the tail is still moving up. Does that make sense? Alright, so I'm going to move this to 12 and maybe this will help. When 12 hits, it's going to be down. But you can kind of see the tail's following from that initial position. I'm going to go ahead and make this -30, make it easy. When it hits 12, I'm going to set it to 30 in the other direction, and back up here to -30. Now this feels more like a floppy tail. It doesn't really, like, I don't know, like someone's grabbing a handle. It doesn't really move like a tail. Secondary action is going to follow second to the main mass is what I'm trying to articulate. So I'm going to go down about part of the way, and I'm going to ask this tail to just like not follow this ball completely yet. And at this point I might want to key these things separately, like maybe not moving them all as one mass. So I'm going to go ahead and shift my rotation, or key my rotation values. And then this part of the tail is closer to the ball, so it's kind of following the ball a little bit more. But the rest of this tail isn't ready to follow. It's still kind of stuck in the initial momentum. This creates something called an S-curve temporarily. It's a little hard to articulate without pictures, but what's going on is I'm trying to think the best way to describe what it is I'm doing. You know what? Let's get our old friend the grease pencil out. Maybe this will help. So I'm going to go up to View, Camera Tools, and pull out my old friend the grease pencil to try to explain what's happening here. So in this motion, boy, that's not a really good line. Wish I was drawing with my tablet. Okay, so we've got a tail that is following this ball's upward motion. So it's dragging behind. See? By the time we get to 7, this part of the ball is following, this part of the tail is following the ball, but this part of the tail is still following the initial momentum upward, which creates an S-curve kind of effect. And by the time we get downward, the tail has changed more. So I'm going to go back to these tail controls and let this thing follow through a little bit more. Maybe kind of see that? You see that nice little S motion going on? By the time we get to this point, let me pull that grease pencil back out. Everything's sort of following the tail at that point. I hope that makes sense. I hope that helps describe. S-curve can actually be one of the harder concepts to articulate and grab a hold of, but the more you animate and the more you play with these principles, the quicker they are to grab on. Okay, so the tail's moving kind of nice, following after the ball, and it's got this nice little snap to it at this point. And now we want to kind of do the same thing on the other side. So I'm going to go, I don't know, somewhere halfway in here and start changing the ball going this other way. So I want this delayed action. Just because the ball is coming up this way doesn't mean that I want the whole tail shifting. So just like before, I'm letting the first part of the tail kind of follow the ball, but the rest of it's just not ready to commit. Still wants to follow the momentum of the initial bounce. Ooh, I don't know if I'm liking that. I want it to follow through a little more. We go 1, 2, 2 over like before, and then creating this nice little snap. Ooh, there we go. Ooh, that might be a little too snappy. A little fussy there. Snap, snap. Okay, yeah, that might be a little bit too much. Let's try. Grabbing this and moving this over a frame. Oh, I need to do that on all of them. My bad. Gotta try to keep this consistent. Not grab just one part of the tail and move one key, I'm moving all the keys. Okay. Yeah. It's getting there, but I'm not feeling it yet. There. This is part of my problem. I think I want this to start curving under a little faster. Yeah. Oh, much better. You just kind of feel it when it works. So you have this nice secondary action now. Perfect. It takes a little bit of playing. It's not something that's like an equation where every time you enter in a certain number, it's always going to come out a certain way. You just select a pose. So in this case, you know, the tail is following the ball. The ball was on its way up last time we were with it. We go halfway down. We know that in the halfway mark, the tail is going to be going the opposite way. And then we just kind of start allowing this tail to follow this ball instead of going at the same time so that it's a true secondary action. Now, if this is a little bit too much, too soon, as far as animation, you can do something a lot simpler. You're not required to do a full S-curve type animation. If this is just kind of a little too much for third day of animation, that's fine. So instead, try something a little easier, like maybe let me go ahead and save this actually, so I can come back to it. So I'm gonna go ball bounce, or let's see, we were at bounce 1. I'm gonna make this bounce 2, and then I'm gonna open up ball bounce 1, which didn't have any animation on it. Something you could do instead, or animation on the tail rather. We got this animation down. Just for starters, oh really? That button broke again already? Ugh, pain in the butt. All right. 8, 2, 3, 4. Up here, create sets, quick select sets, tail. It's all caps. That's funny. Whoa, whoops. Huh. So what I did was when I created that set, I pressed OK instead of just add shelf. So I did create the quick select set, but only in the outliner. You have to actually click add to shelf. So tail, add to shelf. So I don't have to keep grabbing. So something you might be able to do instead is just a little motion. With just a little bit of follow through. Now that's still not very compelling. You're still going to have to go in and ask it to be to follow a little bit better. Ah! But that's a little simpler. All I did was I grabbed the tail, I set its two poses, pose 1, pose 12, pose 24, and then I went a couple frames out and already transitioned this motion to happen a little sooner on the 4 that's going to transition into the 12, and same with the 16, because if I leave this ball moving without frames 4 and 16, then what I'm going to end up with is, well, here, just right click, delete that tangent, or that key, right click, delete that key. What I end up with something is moving at the same time. It doesn't feel like it's following. So all I did was I added an extra pose mid-air where you're actually seeing the tail follow after the ball. And this one doesn't have the S curve, it's just a very simple drag. And it'll easier to follow. And it still looks good. It still feels like a drag motion. Okay? So the last thing that we were going to touch on were the ears, and it's not required that you do this, but it's kind of nice. So the ears kind of work the same way. I'm not going to key all these individual little controllers. I'm just going to worry about this one. So there's a controller at the base, and if you move that base controller, it moves the ear out of the fox's head, which isn't going to help. The one right above it allows for some distortion. You can distort it forward, back, side to side. We don't have to get too crazy with it. So I'm going to grab it on both sides. So grab one controller, press Shift, grab the other, and we're only dealing with rotation. So Shift E for rotating that channel. And 12, by the time it hits 12, okay. Shift E, Shift E. So I just went ahead and set up some keys to start with. I'm gonna rotate this up. There we go. So you kind of feel that drag. When it comes this direction, we're gonna want to shift this so that it's following the new momentum. There. Very simple. So what I did, just to make sure you caught it, was I keyed the second control on both sides. I set a Shift E, which is a rotation key. When we got to 12, this was, grab that wax pencil. What this was doing, the ears are aiming straight up because of the drag, so the air resistance. As the ball comes down, the ears are going to go up, right? Okay. And then, of course, as the ball goes back up, it's going to cause these ears to droop down because the ball's going up, and these ears are catching the air, causing them to droop the other direction. So I just went a couple of frames in. And then as the ball comes back up to the top, it kind of, comes back to its regular resting shape. I'm going to get rid of these marks. This is very distracting. So, sweet. So the resting pose, because, there's kind of that pause right before it goes down, right when it's come up. Ears stretch down, or stretch backward, then they stretch backward the other way. And we got a nice little ball bounce with some secondary action. Okay, so go ahead and give this a try. You can get this particular version a try. If you feel more daring, you can go the whole way out. So let's go ahead and open up the original box bounce I showed at the beginning. If you feel a little bit more daring, you can really go to town with that tail and create that S motion. It's really what you're comfortable with. So give it a shot, and we'll see what you put together for this Tuesday. Thank you so much, and Have fun!